Norway. It's a professional services firm. We want to make our internal delivery as simple as possible to be able to deliver on all the requirements that our business has. I think there is always going to be a requirement for hybrid, and data is going to move into the cloud and back again. When Microsoft Azure Stack surfaced, we thought that that may be the solution. Our business partner, Candidator, delivers our data center.
KPMG wanted to do less of the daily running of their data centers and do more of what they're good at. We looked at different type of stack technology, and we decided very quickly that Microsoft was the one furthest ahead. And together with a partnership with Dell EMC, we have a hardware provider we can trust, we have a software provider we trust. Azure Stack gives us the flexibility which we need for Candidator and the flexibility we need for onboarding larger customers.
The European data regulation of the GDPR is restricting how we handle all privacy data. What Azure gives us is a lot of good tools to identify the data, identify where we have any gaps, and help us mediate those gaps. Developers are developing in Azure today. You're going to present them a very unified environment where they can be sure that something that they do in one place can be used all over the place, and without having to package each of them specifically. Our business is transforming, and creating that value for the customer will be essential in the future.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming to the Azure Stack session. A lot of excitement. I'm Natalia Mickiewicz, and I'm the General Manager for Azure Stack at Microsoft. I'm really excited to be here. Ignite is one of my favorite conferences. About 3 years ago, we announced Azure Stack and the vision of Azure Stack at the Ignite conference. And the customers, the industry really responded well to our vision of having cloud consistency. Literally a year ago at Ignite in Orlando was our general availability for Azure Stack. So I'm excited that this is our 1-year anniversary, and to see all of the continued engagement from customers, from the industry on Azure Stack, and the ability to have a consistent cloud platform between Azure and on-premises. So today I'm going to go through an overview of Azure Stack. Great to know, show of hands in the room, how many of you here today know about Azure Stack and have used it before? Show of hands. So a good percentage, great to know. And for those of you that don't know a lot about Azure Stack, I am going to go through a little bit of what Azure Stack is. So bear with me for those of you who've been on this journey with me for the last year. I am going to go through just details of what Azure Stack is and why we think it's such an exciting product capability for Microsoft and for the industry. So first, you've probably heard Satya and others at Microsoft talking about intelligent cloud and intelligent edge. And I really want to frame how Azure Stack fits into the intelligent cloud, intelligent edge. Microsoft, you know of Azure. Azure is an intelligent cloud. Clouds are intelligent. They provide ubiquitous computing, a lot of AI capabilities, so machine learning capabilities, so you can really get a lot of insights from your data. At the edge, Microsoft has a vast array of solutions that are available to provide your edge computing capabilities. So those devices can be from devices all the way up to a cloud and a cloud capability that you can have on premises. The key to those devices and ecosystem of devices and systems is they can provide you real-time analysis from all of your systems on premises. So you can gather and analyze data. You can get insights from those data, and you can do that real time closest to where the data resides. We have an entire continuum of products and services that are available at the edge that provide consistency from the cloud all the way to the edge devices. Those start from the MCU devices, which is Azure Sphere, all the way up to a full cloud capability, which is Azure Stack. The key is consistency across those. The consistency is across security, identity, management, AI capabilities with machine learning, as well as an entire ecosystem. When you look at the Azure devices, from Sphere through DataBox Edge. Azure IoT is a continuum that's available for development capabilities. And then with Azure Stack and Azure, you also have the Azure services that can be consistent. But Azure Stack provides you the capability to have an entire cloud. So even in absence of Azure, you can be completely disconnected and run your edge locally with Azure Stack. It is a cloud, so it is not just providing containerized services and capabilities, but it gives you full cloud capabilities, and you can connect your entire edge ecosystem from machine learning to device capabilities from an IoT with Azure Stack and the rest of the Microsoft capabilities. So Azure Stack, though, is more than just the edge. The reason we developed Azure Stack was for 3 primary use cases we were seeing from customers. The first, as I talked about within the intelligent edge, is customers needed to have the capability to run in fully disconnected environments. They may have network latency requirements. They may have bandwidth issues. So you can imagine being in the middle of an ocean where there's only satellite connectivity, in a mine shaft where there's no network connectivity whatsoever, oil and gas. There's many where there's edge and disconnected scenarios. You just don't have the bandwidth. But Azure Stack fulfills other needs that we're seeing from customers. The other is regulatory and data sovereignty requirements. So in many countries, there are regulations that prohibit you from going to a public cloud, or you need to keep that data resident in one location in your country. Azure Stack can give you cloud capabilities while still maintaining your regulatory or data sovereignty requirements. And the last is application modernization. Here we're seeing that many customers have their applications might be on legacy or heritage systems, and those systems need to be modernized. Instead of bringing the application to Azure, you can bring the cloud to that application. So you're bringing Azure to your application to modernize it. So we've got a lot of momentum in the last year. As I mentioned, this is our anniversary. But we continue because Azure Stack is a cloud. As a cloud, we continue to provide updates and have capabilities available. We're seeing a lot of momentum from customers, from partners, about Azure Stack in this last year. A couple that you see here is Rio Tinto. They committed to deploy Azure Stack, so that was a recent press release that was available. Then we've got some insights from other analysts and press about the power of having cloud available on premises. So this is momentum that we continue to see throughout the year, but very exciting to see how it is part of the intelligent cloud to have that available at the edge. Here's a few highlights since the last year. Again, this is a cloud. As a cloud, we update frequently. We might not update daily and have that available to customers, but we have releases to the cloud on roughly a monthly basis. So here's just a few things that we've accomplished in this last year. First, we've added new hardware partners. We've added additional geographies. We've got a lot of additional features based on requirements we heard from customers like yourselves. Things like Azure Site Recovery. One of the things that I'm most excited about is because of edge and disconnected scenarios, there's been a requirement for IoT scenarios. So we announced IoT Hub in development, and later in this session, we're going to show you a demonstration of that. Beyond just the features we've developed, we also have been working with the ecosystem, because as a cloud, we want to ensure that the ecosystem also has applications and services available for you to be on premises. As an example, there's Pivotal Cloud Foundry that we had announced from, so you've got Kubernetes types of implementations that are available consistently between Azure and Azure Stack. We will do continuous improvement with Azure Stack over time, so you can continue to see roughly monthly updates on Azure Stack. We'll continue to add additional features and functionality, as well as ecosystem capabilities. So when we launched Azure Stack, new product, it was available in 43 countries. That's a lot of countries to be available for a V1 product. A lot for my team to handle, for sure. Because of customer demand in a lot of locations, we've expanded that to 92 countries today. So we're available in 92 countries. One trip that I did last year was talking to customers in Africa, on the continent of Africa. And it was clear in Africa, there are many countries that have data sovereignty requirements. So we listened to customers, and now we expanded and we're available in 92 countries. Liquid Telecom is an example where in Africa, they are a service provider providing Azure services with Azure Stack in Africa. Really meeting the needs of their customers to have Azure consistent services on premises in locations that meet data sovereignty and regulatory requirements. So very excited to say we're in 92 countries today. Customers, from a customer momentum perspective, I visit customers, I feel like, almost every day. And I love visiting them and talking to and understanding requirements so we can prioritize features and capabilities. Azure Stack has resonated with customers across the globe in almost every industry and vertical. So as an example, here are some of the key customers that are using Azure Stack today. And you'll see that those customers across retail, financial services, oil and gas, if you look at consulting services, media and entertainment, it is really because those customers need to have cloud capabilities in on-premises environments. The key pattern that I see across these is they do either use them for those edge scenarios, or they will use them for data sovereignty regulation or modernizing their legacy systems. So we're really excited to see the uptake of Azure Stack across those industry and verticals and how we're partnering together with different customers and service providers to deliver Azure services. So for those of you, you mentioned many of you here know what Azure Stack is. For those of you that don't, I'm going to go through a little bit more about the Azure Stack promise. One, and this is really critical, is Azure Stack is an extension of Azure. So it is not a replacement for Azure. It really is an extension of Azure that gives you consistent cloud platform available on premises. It is literally the same API as Azure because we've taken code and brought it down to Azure Stack. What that provides you, because you can use your same development patterns that you do in public cloud, you can use on modern practices. So it gives you that agility, flexibility, and control. The consistency goes across everything from the tools that you would use for development perspective, how you access the cloud, to the cloud application model. The one thing that is different is the cloud infrastructure. So the tools and experiences are everything from the portal and the UI. When you look at Azure versus Azure Stack, you'll note that the portal looks exactly the same. And that is because we're using the same API. We literally share the code with Azure. So from a development perspective, you can use the same tools and experiences, whether those be Microsoft tools or third-party tools or open source tools. We want to meet developers where they are. The model, cloud application model, the control plane, is the same as Azure. The Azure Resource Manager, for those of you that are familiar with Azure, the Azure Resource Manager is the same. It's the same API. Versions, they go a little faster than we do, and we only provide monthly updates, but it is the same cloud application model. Services and marketplace. There is a minor differentiation here. We don't have all of the services that Azure does today. Many of them will come over time to Azure, and some are better suited at hyperscale. But because we are built on the same cloud application model, the same control plane, we can provide Azure services on Azure Stack. The big difference is the infrastructure, and in the infrastructure, we have used an integrated systems design where we've partnered with hardware partners to deliver Azure Stack. The benefits of having an integrated system is we've done a lot of the work to test, to validate, to work together with those hardware partners so you can actually focus more on delivering value to your business and providing more of those cloud services to your business. Value proposition are threefold. The first is consistent application development. Great to see you in the audience, show of hands. How many of you here are developers or do DevOps? So few, quite a few actually, which is great to see. The rest, how many of you work more in IT operations? So we're about, I think, 50-50, close to that. It's hard to see with the lights. But the key is, Azure Stack gives you the same cloud application model, and the industry is moving more towards DevOps, where there's a tight integration between developers and operations. With Azure Stack, we have a consistent application development model. So it does mean the same tools, the same experiences. You can have the same application patterns. If you're using templates, JSON templates, to actually describe an application, that application can be described from everything from multiple virtual machines and delivered as a solution on Azure Stack. The key is being able to use the open source tools that you like. So we meet developers where they are. Sometimes I get questions on Azure Stack of being a Microsoft cloud and a Microsoft offering. And just like Azure, we really are about meeting developers where they are and meeting our customers where they are. So we have a wealth of your favorite tools that you want to use. Management, it could be Puppet and Chef. From an application perspective, you can have things like Pivotal Cloud Foundry or Drupal. Apps and frameworks, you can have Apache Spark. You can have Microsoft tools and technologies, but you can also have the open source tools and technologies that your teams are used to using. At an infrastructure level, again, we are not Microsoft only. So we do support, of course, Windows. But at the same time, we have Linux operating systems that are supported on Azure Stack, or open source tools and frameworks like Red Hat OpenShift or Docker. Containers is one thing that we have seen in the industry. People are starting to adopt more and more from a development perspective to actually provide more agility in development. So show of hands in the room, how many people here are starting to use containers within their organization? So quite a few, and I'm seeing it more and more. Are you using, in the audience, using things like Docker? Are you using Kubernetes, OpenShift? So it looks like quite a few in different flavors. And we're seeing in the industry, it is not just one container platform that people are using. They want choice to meet their needs. For a lot of enterprises, I'm seeing Red Hat OpenShift to be a key scenario for them because for the enterprise, it has a lot of the enterprise-grade features. But from a development perspective, you want the choice of the orchestrator. You also want to be able to integrate with the services that you have available. And you want to be able to deploy on your corporate network. So these are really key from your container choice. And on Azure Stack, we do have choice and flexibility. So to speak to that, I've brought Sriram on stage here, and he's going to provide a demo for you on Red Hat OpenShift on Azure Stack. So we're really delighted about the partnership with Red Hat OpenShift to provide a Kubernetes orchestrator on Azure Stack that is consistent with the one on Azure. Thanks, Sri.
Thank you, Natalia. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sriram Natarajan, and I'm a program manager working on the Azure Stack product as well. OpenShift is Red Hat's container orchestration platform. What you're about to see today is the Red Hat OpenShift platform deployed and running on the Azure Stack cloud, and you're going to see what you can do with it by deploying a couple of containers, and let's deploy a couple of workloads and go with it. One important thing to note is that this is available in production for you today. So let's get right into it. This is the Azure Stack user portal. For those of you that are not familiar with Azure Stack, as you can see, this is the exact same consistent experience that we deliver in the Azure portal, except this one's running on the Azure Stack platform. What you see here is basically the list of resources that have been spun up by installing the OpenShift platform on Azure Stack. This is all templatized, so you can just one-click deploy OpenShift directly on the Azure Stack platform. I've also pinned the OpenShift console, which is the administrative management console for OpenShift, directly on my Azure Stack dashboard itself. Let's jump right into OpenShift. Here, you can see all of the containers that can be deployed using OpenShift directly from a web portal. You can deploy both publicly available container images as well as bring your own containers, bring your own applications, and deploy them through OpenShift. In addition to this, you will also be able to connect to Azure services, just like how you would in Azure today with the OpenShift platform, with the Open Service Broker APIs that's available to you. As you can see from the portal, you can deploy containers for databases like Mongo, MySQL, Postgres, Maria, etc. You can deploy CI/CD management engines like Jenkins, as well as deploy additional workloads like Redis or Spark even on the OpenShift platform on Azure Stack. I'm going to go in a little bit further, and I'm going to show you how you deploy a Spark cluster on Azure Stack. Ready? OK. So you generally deploy Spark using an orchestration engine. It's called Oshinko, and that has a web-based UI. So I've already deployed Oshinko as a prerequisite for this demo. Let's go into the Oshinko UI. It's a very simple UI. All you do there is go to deploy, name the cluster. I'm going to call this Ignite 2018 1. Oh. 1. I'm going to give it 1 worker because I want to just initially deploy a Spark cluster. And there you go. The cluster deployment has already started. And this will only take a couple of minutes. If I go back to my OpenShift UI, you will see that it started spinning up a master node and a worker node for Spark directly inside OpenShift. No coding needed. Right after this, your developers or you can basically go in and deploy Spark-based applications directly in the Spark cluster that just got spun up. And now you see the Spark cluster is already running. What's more, you can scale the Spark cluster directly from this UI. All I have to do is go here, click on Scale, and let's say I want to put more load on the system, so I'm going to scale it to 3 workers. And it's going to go off on its own and start executing. If I go back to my OpenShift, you will notice that my worker count went up to 3 pods. This is actually being deployed live right now on OpenShift running on Azure Stack.
So you scaled that just right now immediately and scaled it that
Right there.
quickly, 3 clusters?
Right there.
And is that the same as in Azure?
Yes, this is exactly how this works in Azure. And in fact, Spark is one of the message analysis platforms that we can use to connect to Event Hubs or Kafka to get real-time messaging insights on this as well. And this is exactly how you would do it in Azure with the Oshinko Web UI. So I talked about 3 concepts today. I talked about OpenShift, which is a container orchestration platform. I talked about Oshinko, which is a deployment engine, and Spark, which is a real-time big data analysis platform that can plug into messaging pipelines like Event Hubs. And all of this is running on Azure Stack.
So you can use this in an edge solution from an IoT perspective using a container solution with OpenShift.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Shri.
Thank you, Natalia.
So the next component I wanted to go through is Azure Services on Premises, and this is really exciting. What you saw with Shri is one of our partner solutions, which is Red Hat OpenShift, which is a Kubernetes deployment. We also have Azure services that are available with Azure Stack on Premises. When we actually went out in market, we had things like app services that were available, so you could easily provide web applications. We've got virtual machines. We saw a lot of third-party ecosystems, which is the marketplace. And for me, marketplace is near and dear to me. Prior to working on Azure Stack, I actually managed an organization, the partner and customer ecosystem team. So partners to me are important. I think it's important to look at our broad ecosystem and how we work together, because the ecosystem gives us additional applications and services that are available. In Azure Stack, you have your own marketplace that you can manage and control. So we can syndicate content from Azure and bring it down to Azure Stack, but you maintain that management and control of what's available in that marketplace. We have other Azure services, including things like Key Vault to manage your application keys. We've got storage, blobs, tables, queues, networking, and then we added things like serverless computing with Azure Functions. One of the things I'm most excited about and key things that we've been asked about in the last year is in edge scenarios, there really is a need to drive IoT solutions. So we had announced that IoT Hub is in development on Azure Stack. So IoT Hub really gives you the capability to manage all of the devices and sensor data that you have. Now you'll be able to run a fully disconnected IoT solution end-to-end using Azure Stack as your cloud. One thing that we announced just more recently, though, is just today in the blog, is Event Hubs is available, it's not available, Event Hubs is in development on Azure Stack as well. So Event Hubs will complement IoT Hub, where you can do a lot of the stream processing. Stream processing, for those of you that are more old-timers, are things like the message queue or MQM. It's really the stream processing that's available for solutions. So I'm going to hand back over to Sriram, and now we're actually going to show you a demonstration of having IoT and Event Hubs available on Azure Stack. And it's in development on Azure Stack, but you can see how much development we've done. Thank you, Sriram.
Absolutely. This is an exciting demo. I really love doing this demo. What you're about to see is IoT Hub and Event Hub, the Azure services, running completely on an Azure Stack platform. This can run either in a connected scenario or completely disconnected from the internet. What I'm about to show you is how you can connect your IoT devices to IoT Hub on Azure Stack. We'll run through some scenarios there, and I will also show you how IoT Hub integrates with Event Hub, so you have a standard messaging platform available to you in Azure Stack also that your peripheral applications can take a dependency on. So this on the left, I've split the screen into two parts. The left is the Azure Stack portal, and the right is a sample device that I'm about to show you. Imagine this scenario. You're in a factory floor. There's a whole bunch of machines that we have on the factory floor, and you have a whole set of devices that monitor and manage said machines. IoT Hub on Azure Stack will be able to manage and monitor those devices, so you will be able to better manage your factory floor as a whole through the IoT scenario. What you see on the left is a sample IoT Hub that I've already created. And in the UI, I'm able to go add net new IoT devices or IoT edge. Let's talk about devices first. I've already gone in and added a thermostat. Now, this is a thermostat that monitors a machine that needs to be kept at a certain temperature. For those of you who are familiar with machines, certain machines have to be kept under a certain temperature or at a certain temperature for it to be optimal and also to make maintenance easier. This is one such device that is connected to my IoT Hub on Azure Stack. Let me initialize this device. So there it is. The device now says that the machine is being held at 19 degrees. What I can do right here, directly from the context of my IoT Hub portal, is I will be able to manage this device directly. So right now, it says the firmware is 1. I can update the firmware of this device directly from my IoT Hub extension. All I do is change it to 2.0, and I save. And as you can immediately see on the right, my device has started updating its firmware. After a little while, there you go, my firmware is 2.0. So all I'm doing is sending messages and firmware updates from my IoT Hub, from my cloud, to my device. And now this conversation is bidirectional, which basically means the device can now talk back to IoT Hub as well and send telemetry data. Now, let's imagine this. The room kind of gets hotter because of some operational scenario. I'm going to simulate that by just increasing the temperature on the thermostat. Now, the thermostat is detecting this, and it is sending that data back to IoT Hub that is running on Azure Stack. And as you can see here, the temperature is reported as 21. If I push this out even further, you will notice that the temperature is now 22. So the device is sending the message back to IoT Hub. And when you have other applications in Azure Stack that is consuming this data, you will be able to build peripheral applications that can also talk to your devices. Now, let's take a look at something else. I've told you that this is a machine that needs to be maintained at a certain temperature. In my case, this machine needs to be maintained at 16 degrees. But right now, it's getting too hot for that machine to run. IoT Hub can natively detect such scenarios, and you will be able to set predetermined methods that will, in this case, reduce the temperature of a certain thing. So I've decided that I needed a method called air conditioning. I'm not doing anything else. I've just set up a method called air conditioning, and air conditioning knows that it needs to start the HVAC system to cool the room down, right? So I can just do invoke method directly here, and as you can see, my device detected that, hey, I need to cool the system down because this machine is getting very hot. and it automatically reduced the temperature down to 16 degrees. So the communication is bidirectional, and you will be able to monitor and manage a whole bunch of IoT devices completely disconnected from the internet directly on Azure Stack. How cool is that?
Isn't that awesome?
Now for the second part of this. I talked about how event hubs and IoT hubs work hand in hand to be able to handle your devices, right? The telemetry data that is coming from these devices go to Event Hub. Event Hub is a message streaming, big data analysis messaging platform that is available to you on Azure Stack. So what I'm about to do is go to an Event Hub UI and show you the data that's coming in from this device. So let's minimize this for a second. And here is the setup. Again, the screen is split into two halves. I request your attention to the left part of the screen. As you can see, the device, the thermostat that we were just playing with right now, has been sending telemetry data, and that telemetry data is directly going to the Event Hub that is running on Azure Stack as well. If I go take a look at one of the messages, you will see that, hey, I just did bring the temperature up to 21, and all through this, it's been sending me messages each time reporting the temperature of that thermostat directly in Event Hubs. Now, here's where I'm going to turn this demo up a notch. Because Event Hubs and IoT Hubs, they're consistent services between Azure and Azure Stack. It's the exact same code base that's being brought down to Azure Stack. Event Hubs in Azure Stack and Event Hubs in Azure are consistent. I can set my IoT Hub to send messages either to Event Hubs on Azure Stack or make it a hybrid scenario and send it to Event Hubs in Azure as well. Imagine this scenario. In the factory floor, you have a local administrator managing the operations of the factory, and you have a regional administrator that is handling multiple factories. Let's say the temperature of a particular machine goes beyond a certain threshold so as to cause an alarm, right? You can now set IoT Hub to route these messages not only to your local Event Hub instance, but also to route it to the Event Hub instance in Azure, so the regional administrator is now able to get these alerts. So now, on the right is my Event Hubs running in Azure. So far as you see, no messages have been coming to this Event Hub just yet, right? They're all on the left side, which is the Azure Stack Event Hub. I'm going to go in, and I'm going to raise the temperature beyond a tolerable threshold. In this case, I'm just going to go here and say, I'm going to crank it up all the way to 30. This is a machine that needs to stay at 16 degrees, but the temperature is getting so hot that I'm cranking it all the way above 30. Now the threshold is exceeded here. So let's go back, and I will show you that, see on the right, now the messages are not only being sent to my local Azure Stack Event Hubs, but it's also being sent to the Event Hubs in Azure to warn the regional administrator, hey, there is a high-level incident that's happening here. You might want to know, or you might want to take action on it. So you can build hybrid scenarios with IoT Hub and Event Hub on Azure Stack and connect it to Azure and build peripheral applications all around them. That's the second part of my demo.
But wait, there's more.
There's more. How many of you have heard about the IoT edge devices that they've been talking about in the keynote? Yeah, quite a few. IoT edge devices can also be connected to IoT hubs on Azure Stack. So I've set up an IoT edge device, and I've connected it to the IoT hub that's running on Azure Stack right now, as you can see. The great part about the IoT edge devices is that it can run modules. It can run different modules like machine learning, what have you, on it directly. I've pushed a machine learning module to an IoT edge device that is monitoring another thermostat. And that thermostat is now not only sending messages, but the edge device is also able to perform machine learning on top of it and is able to detect anomalies. I've built an application that reads off of this. And as you can see, the temperature is being reported by the device, but every so often you see a red dot. The machine learning module basically ran on that device and is saying, hey, this temperature or this input that's coming in from this device is an anomaly. So you can perform machine learning operations at the edge with the help of IoT Edge, IoT Hub, and Event Hubs, all running on the Azure Stack platform.
Pretty impressive. Yeah. Thank you, Shrey. So I love that demo because it's really applicable in almost every industry and vertical when you're looking at edge solutions. So Sri talked about factory floors, but you could imagine the same type of environment where you're using an IoT platform connected at an edge cloud in areas like healthcare, in retail, in many different industries and verticals where you need a full IoT solution. So we're very excited about having IoT and event hubs in development and addressing customer needs. So the last pillar of Azure Stack is the purpose-built integrated systems. And this was a real design choice that we had for Azure Stack, is to use purpose-built systems where we partnered with hardware partners to deliver Azure Stack. So we provided highly prescribed reference architecture and design, and we worked together with our hardware partners to validate the pre-configured solution. We've invested a lot of engineering efforts on the deployment capabilities and then the patch and update technologies. The update is really critical. I mentioned earlier that this is a cloud, and as a cloud, we need to update it frequently. We provide features and functionality as well as security fixes. So we do provide roughly monthly updates to the systems. So imagine having to update an entire cloud, all the different components. Ours is fully orchestrated to do the update technologies. Security and privacy is another aspect that was really critical for us. So we have sealed infrastructure to ensure that you have the best security and privacy possible for the system. And then we do field replacement of parts. We've worked with our ecosystem of hardware partners. A year ago, when we launched Azure Stack at GA, we had 3 hardware partners. It was HPE, Dell EMC, and Lenovo. We've expanded our ecosystem of hardware partners, and that's based on customer feedback. Our customers wanted choice of what vendor they wanted to use for an Azure Stack system. So we have Fujitsu now, Huawei. We've got Wortmann AG through a partnership with Lenovo, with Intel. And so we've got breadth and depth of our hardware ecosystem that is available for you to choose Azure Stack systems. So with that, I'm going to invite Justin up to do an additional demo. The things that we're going to show you in this demonstration are more at the infrastructure level. I talked about the investment that we made at the infrastructure. We actually created an infrastructure experience in Azure Stack. One of the key features people have been asking for is additional scale. So Justin's going to show us a demonstration on adding scale as well as our update technologies for Azure Stack. I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Natalia. All right, so those are some really cool demos that Sri did. You know, seeing all the capabilities you can do at the top. I work down at the bottom of the stack, and we keep the infrastructure humming along. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you all about today was how simple it is to add a node in Azure Stack. And like Natalia mentioned earlier, we have the patch and update capabilities. And so we wanted to keep these artifacts super simple so you folks can do these cool things on the top of Stack. Keep the meters running, keep the services going to your customers, keep your customers happy, and focus on other aspects of your business. Like I said, keeping the meter spinning. And so contextually, if you look at the Azure Stack portal, this is where the operators spend their time. And like Natalia said, it's just like Azure. It's the same UI, it's the same API set, but it's a little bit different in that there are things as an Azure Stack operator that you need to manage. So if I look at the alert space, one of the new capabilities we added at 1807 was the ability to easily add a node. And so we've got a lot of really good hardware vendors that we work with, a lot of our partners that we work with. And so if I get an alert that says...
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry for the interruption. So Justin just talked about 1807. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with Azure Stack, again, we provide updates on a monthly basis.
Yep.
So 1807 really is the year and the month. So he's talking about just a recent release we had of Azure Stack.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so with the update that we had last month, we have the ability to go in and add a node, and it's super simple. And so like Natalia said, if you're going to generate an alert in Stack as an operator, tell me exactly what to do. And in this scenario, I had one of my operators that wasn't able to provision a VM because she had run out of capacity, specifically memory, on her Azure Stack instance. Call your OEM vendor, have them come out, rack and stack a new node, give you the BMC IP address. Once they give you that, you can go through, and it even tells you in the alert, hey, here's exactly what you need to do. Go back to the administration portal, and just like in Azure, as you create a new asset, you'll go New, simply select Capacity, Scale Unit Node, And you just got to provide a couple things. The first thing you'll provide is just the region name. You'll give it a BMC IP address that the OEM had provided you before. Select your scale unit.
So you're adding capacity real time.
Yeah, and just hit create and it goes.
Nice.
Yeah, and if you've got a 4-node system, now you have a 5-node system. If you've got an 8-node system, now you've got a 9. If you've got a 12, now you've got a 13. Super easy to do.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and then the other thing you talked about, Natalia, was the update space, 1807 being our most recent release. These are about 2.5 gigs in size, and so a lot of the scenarios that you talked about earlier, Azure Stack was born initially, this disconnected, and we want to make sure we absolutely support disconnected. And so the update space, all you need to do, if you had a thumb drive on you, hand it over, put 2.5 gigs worth of payload on the thumb drive, walk it over to your disconnected stamp, ingest it through the portal. You just have to go into the blob service account, just like you would in Azure, managing blob service accounts. Ingest the payload, set a maintenance window with your customers, and run it.
So you can update the Azure Stack system when it's not connected to Azure?
Absolutely, absolutely. And for folks that are connected, every time that we have an update available, the update resource provider that's native to Azure Stack will pull our secure endpoint in Azure, look for an update available, and just present to you as an operator, hey, Natalia, we've got an update available, and you go back to the administration space.
And there's just an alert there.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
click it and walk away.
That makes it really easy. So that is one of the things customers really want, is you need to be able to update the system on a monthly basis. So Justin really showed how you can add scale, but then also update the system very easily, and even in a disconnected environment. So if you have no network connectivity, you still have a way to easily update your Azure Stack system.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So now what you've all been waiting for, right, is roadmap. Let's go through roadmap of where we are with Azure Stack, and I'm going to really focus on 2 different things within the roadmap. First is the capabilities on Azure Stack, the Azure capabilities. So these are more the top of the stack features and functionality, so it could be some of the services as well as our third-party applications and services that are available on Azure Stack, as well as some of the IaaS capabilities. So some of the demos that you saw from Sriram, things like the OpenShift or some services would be on the Azure capabilities on Azure Stack. Context for you, we really look at 2 different types of milestones. So we saw the IoT Hub and Event Hubs. Those are in development. So they're not generally available today on Azure Stack, but they are coming soon. So in development, we have a few things, such as Kubernetes on Azure Stack, the IoT and Event Hubs that you saw, as well as SQL Server 2019. So how many of you here have seen the SQL Server 2019 capabilities that were announced on Azure? We have that in development. And then we have the now available. Now available are capabilities you can use today on Azure Stack and use those in production. And those are everything from additional VM sizes. So we've got the AV2 and FVM sizes. So those are consistent with Azure. 2 things like managed disks. And managed disks was a feature that customers wanted to have consistency with some of their templates that they have available on Azure. They didn't all just come available today because we do release on roughly a monthly basis. So these features and functionalities have been available over time in those monthly releases. So one of the key things I'm going to talk about that is in development is SQL Server 2019 on Azure Stack. So SQL 2019 in Azure right now there are some sessions this week on SQL Server 2019 on Azure. It is in development on Azure Stack. It's a really cool thing that they've done with SQL Server 2019. It gives you the capability to really connect to any of your relational or non-relational data stores. And instead of having to do a translation, you can actually make SQL queries and access some of your other database technologies. So those could be anything from things like SAP HANA to your relational databases like SQL Server or Oracle. I'm really excited about this because it gives you the capability to connect to your legacy systems very easily based on the VPN. So it's a really exciting capability to have available on Azure Stack. So with that, we're going to go back to yet another demo. and Sriram's going to do a demo on SQL Server 2019.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you.
All right, so we talked about containers on Azure Stack. We talked about container orchestration platforms like OpenShift running on Azure Stack. We talked about IoT Hub and Event Hub generating tons of data from across all devices that you've connected it to on Azure Stack as well. Now, let's take a look at how containers and big data comes together in SQL Server 2019, bringing together the power, the flexibility, and the familiarity of SQL Server along with the big data and machine learning capabilities of Spark and HDFS, all running in a flexible Kubernetes cluster on Azure Stack.
Sounds
That's
like
a
lot.
mouthful.
It is a mouthful, Shri.
Let me break that down.
Break it down a little bit. That was a lot.
Let me break that down a little bit. SQL Server 2019 can now natively run machine learning or machine learning models because it's got machine learning server and machine learning services directly built into it. What this means is by bringing the intelligence to the database where your data is stored at and providing you the ability to perform predictive analytics on the data at the database level, now you as a developer or your developers don't have to learn anything special about machine learning to be able to implement artificial intelligence or machine learning in their applications. If you have an application that can connect to SQL Server and execute a stored procedure, you can now take advantage of this machine learning that SQL Server natively provides. And
I think that's really effective. So what Shri's going to demonstrate is a hospital-based application.
Yes.
The hospital-based application, if I remember correctly, it's going to actually predict length of stay.
Absolutely, correct. The scenario is I'm a triage nurse in an ER, and I have a bunch of patients lined up in front of me, and my job is to admit them into the hospital. We're going to look at one of those applications that I use when I admit a patient into the hospital.
Okay.
All right. So this is a simple-looking application. This is actually a simple application. What this does is basically take all of the data about a particular patient, their past medical history, their current symptoms, and all the vitals information coming in from all of the IoT devices that are just connected to this patient, like heart rate monitors, blood pressure.
Blood pressure.
Yes, well, I have no comeback for that. Blood pressure and other attributes of that person. It's able to take all of this information, be able to run a machine learning model on top of it, and it's able to predict how long this patient is going to stay in the ER. Predicting a patient's length of stay is one of the key metrics that hospital administrators look at today. A lot of them have been trying it, and a few have succeeded, but this is still a largely open area in the industry today. By predicting a patient's length of stay, a hospital administrator can choose how he needs to distribute their limited resources like beds or medicines or staff their appropriate departments with headcount and be able to optimize better. All of this is going to lead to lowering the patient's costs, lowering the patient's medical costs here. So in this particular application, I have Anthony, and based off all of his data, the application has now detected that he is going to stay in the hospital for 2 days. Let's take a look at another patient. Let's take Anna, for instance. Anna, depending on all of her symptoms, she's going to stay here for longer. Now, this application is just a client application that is connected to a SQL Server that is running on Azure Stack. This is SQL Server 2019 that is running on Azure Stack here with the local IP address. And if you look at it here, you have tables for models. You have stored procedures that will do prediction directly built into my SQL Server. So this application, all it needs to do is connect to SQL Server and execute stored procedures that will in turn perform machine learning operations, and instantly it's become a smarter application, right? Now, let's prove that theory a little bit further. I said intelligence at the database layer basically means that any application connecting to that database can now benefit from the ML and the AI operations running in the database, right? Let's take a look at another application. This is a very well-known application that most, if not all of us, have used and love. Let's take a look at Power BI. The greatest purpose of this is to be able to connect to data sources, be able to fetch data, visualize it. Now, if you notice, this is connected to, apologies. Let's go to data source settings. This Power BI is connected to the exact same database server that I showed you, right? And it's reading data from there. Now, there are two personas here. One is the care line manager. This is basically the person who is running a particular department. And the other persona that we're going to see is a hospital administrator, an MCIO of sorts. With all the data coming in, the care line manager is not only able to see the details about individual people, patients admitted into their ward, but is also able to look at all the predictions that are available to them. This is the exact same predictions as the application had, as my ER admit application had. They're able to use these predictions to understand how many people are going to be in their ward 3 days from now, 5 days from now, how many people are predicted to leave my ward in a particular set of time. And if there's a lot of influx of patients, they can choose to staff their wards appropriately so as to cater to the growing need. As a CMIO, as somebody who is running the hospital, I'm able to take a look at it more broadly across all of the wards, across all of the divisions in my hospital, and I'm able to perform machine learning operations. The exact same predictions, again, coming in directly from SQL Server, I'm able to take advantage of in a simple client application, but still powered with machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Very nice. So how is that done today, Shri? Like how would customers do that today?
Today, it's actually one of the most difficult problems that hospitals are dealing with. I'm almost bold enough to say it's impossible to be doing this today. People are foraying into it a little bit right now, but queries of this complexity is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to run today.
And you did that very quickly.
I did that in a matter of seconds, if not milliseconds.
And you could connect to some of your back-end systems too, like an Epic Healthcare or something like that through the...
Absolutely. One of the other problems is because you have data across multiple different systems, be it legacy or other systems, the data, a large part of the machine learning operation is being able to wrangle the data, bring it, and then train models on top of it. Most of the time, because of the way these systems are built, bringing data over, just the task of bringing the data over takes time, and by then the data actually loses its potency, it loses its value. With SQL Server 2019, you will be able to get data from multiple different data sources. SQL Server can actually virtualize this data for you, and you will be able to perform these complex queries across multiple different data stores.
And all on a system that could be disconnected from the internet.
And all of those on a system that can be disconnected from the internet.
And that's, I think, is the biggest point that I want to talk about, is because in a healthcare environment, you could imagine it's mission critical. It literally is life or death. So you could have an Azure Stack system there. So even if you're connected to Azure, you could also use Azure Stack and have that available in a disconnected environment. So thank you, Shri.
Thank you.
OK, we talked about the Azure capabilities on Azure Stack. Now we're going to talk about some of the infrastructure capabilities. So Justin showed us some of the update technologies. He showed us some of the infrastructure portal that we have on Azure Stack. Again, we've got the in development as well as now available. So now available, we have things such as compliance certification guidance. We've got government cloud integration. So that was a big milestone for us, is being available to connect to our Azure government cloud. So if you are working with government agencies or a government agency, you can connect to those. We added additional scale. So Justin showed the ability to add additional storage or capabilities, add a scale unit. We also go to 16 nodes for Azure Stack. So we started out when we released, going from 4 server hyperconverged systems to 12 server hyperconverged systems. And we're really pleased to say now, with our partners, we'll have 16 node scale units that are available. In development, we've got some additional features that will be available soon. And those are things like multiple scale units, being able to display VMs prices, and then Azure Stack behind a proxy. All of these features are based on requests that we've had from customers like yourselves. So really, we are constantly learning and adapting and listening to your feedback to really evolve Azure Stack as a product. So for the infrastructure capabilities, Azure Site Recovery is another highly asked for feature, where you can actually use Azure Stack and then have a site recovery to Azure. So with that, Shri's coming back one last time. to provide an ASR update and config management demo. Thanks, Shri.
Thank you, Natalia. Yes, this is great. We've talked about all the stuff that ships on Azure Stack that you can run on the Azure Stack platform. Let's take a look at this one, where we have services in Azure that can support your resources that are running on the Azure Stack platform, and you'll be able to manage both your Azure assets as well as your Azure Stack assets for these services directly from the Azure portal. What you see on screen is basically a time card application that I have running on my Azure Stack instance. Time card apps are one of the more important apps that we have in our portfolios these days. As you can imagine, I want this application to be backed up, to be failed over to Azure, and I want to have this safe, and I also want this app to be secure, and I want to be able to manage the patches and the security of this application. This, amongst others, has about 4 to 5 virtual machines, as you can see here. It's got a web entity, it's got a procedures, it's got a jump, it's got a database, and it's got other connectivity machines. So it's got about 4 to 5 virtual machines and other resources that are microservices that are playing into this application. Now, let's take a look at the Azure counterpart. I've actually opened up the Azure portal here for you. It's an identical experience. It's identical to a point where I have to go point to the top left and show this is an Azure portal as opposed to an Azure Stack portal. And I have an Azure dashboard that I have customized for my time card application. Here, let's go into one of the recovery vaults. This is the time card recovery vault that I've set up. So you're going to see 3 things. I'm going to show you how you can add a virtual machine on Azure Stack, how you can set it up to be recovered through ASR. We're going to see how you can test a failover of one of the virtual machines I've already added. And third, we will be going to that virtual machine that I've recovered, and we can see what state it's at. So let's do the first part. I'm in the recovery vault. I can go here, and I've already saved like 3 of my machines. I've already set up my infrastructure to have 3 of these machines saved up. So let's do the first step. I'm going back. I have a handy hyperlink here. I'm now going to go set up replication for one of these machines. As you can see directly from the portal, I will be able to set up replication. I'm going to go configure this, and it's going to ask me to fill in a bunch of values. The most important one here is the inbuilt process service. As a prerequisite to this demo, I went into my Azure Stack instance, and I stood up a process server that lets the Azure Site Recovery Engine detect my resources. I now go through this wizard. I can now pick which target, where do I want to set up replication for said virtual machine. There's a bunch of values I can fill out there to customize this. And now it's going to show me that one virtual machine that I've not set up for replication yet. So I can pick up that machine, and as I go through this wizard, it's going to enable replication for that virtual machine. Now, this is still running in Azure Stack, but you're able to see this from the Azure portal, and you're able to set up recovery for this resource directly from the Azure portal. Once I go through this wizard, it's going to enable it for replication. So the second part of my demo is, let me go to a VM that I've already set up for replication. I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and we're going to test a failover. Once I go again into my recovery vault, I will be able to click on one of the virtual machines that I've already set up for replication. And here, I can either failover or I can test failover. Testing failover basically means nothing real is happening. It's spinning up a bunch of resources, but I can see what it looks like before I actually do a failover of this application. So when I hit
test it in advance.
When I hit on test failover, as you can see, this is saying this virtual machine has been working for so long on this, and now when you want to test failover, the time is 8:44 on this local environment. It's not very obvious here, but the recovery point that is available to me is 8:41. So this process server has been replicating every 7 minutes. So at any given point in time, the maximum amount of data I can potentially lose for this virtual machine is 7 minutes.
And then can you change the threshold?
Yes, it is configurable. You will be able to, for more high-performance applications which have a lot more data, you will be able to change that threshold to be more frequent.
Fantastic.
Now, I just have to choose an actual Azure Virtual Network here, one of the VNets that I've already created. I have a timecard VNet target. And once I click on OK, this machine is actually going to go right on ahead and test my failover. The third part of my demo, let's take a look at a failed over machine that's already there. So let's go back to my dashboard, to my handy link. And now I'm going to validate my replication. So this, the timecard DB test, is one of the VMs I'd set up for replications. It basically failed over. I did a test failover on this machine, and I have it readily available right now. And this machine has a serial console that, without actually remote desktoping into this machine, because I'm testing this failover, through the serial console that is directly available to me from my Azure portal, I will be able to log into this machine and be able to see its current state. Due to some networking issues that we have here, this is taking a little bit, but what you would expect to see is a login prompt, which I can log in, and I should be able to see the state of my machine directly from my Azure portal. That's replication. Now, ensuring availability of your applications is one thing. Ensuring that your resources are safe, they're kept patched, and they're kept updated is the second most important task that we have. With the help of log analytics and the Azure health and security assessments that we have, you will now be able to use those services in Azure to be able to do health and security assessments for your resources running in Azure Stack. Now, as a prerequisite this again, I set up the Microsoft monitoring agent on all of my virtual machines, and that makes them visible to the Azure instance. Now, the important point to note here is Azure is not reaching into these Azure Stack environments. We're setting up components inside Azure Stack, so your Azure Stack is reaching out and is able to talk to Azure. That is a very important concept that we have to take a look at here. For this particular app that I have, it's assessed 3 computers. Remember, I only added 3 computers to this process. It's assessed 3 computers, and for each of those computers, it is able to tell me what my security and my update status is. One of them seems to be up to date, but the other 2 needs update. Now, as a security administrator for this application, I can go right on ahead and make sure all of my infrastructure is patched, and this is available to me directly from the context of my Azure portal.
Thank you, Shri.
Back to you.
Yeah, this is great. So beyond some of the features and functionalities, one of the most asked for things is looking at patterns and practices of how to use Azure Stack. So we've invested heavily in looking at patterns and practices to help you when you're coming up to speed with Azure Stack on some of the hybrid application capabilities of Azure Stack. So we've developed patterns, hybrid cloud solutions for multiple different patterns. It's everything from developer experiences, so hybrid DevOps, where you can use Azure as well as Azure Stack from a development perspective, to creating patterns for data sovereignty and gravity. So I'm going to go through a few of these. So hybrid DevOps, this is where you can actually create CI/CD pipelines and look at porting cloud-native applications and infrastructure. So you can use the same tools across Azure and Azure Stack. Where we see this very common is you might want to do some of your development and test efforts in Azure and then bring them down to your application down to an Azure Stack environment. You could also create applications where you could extend Azure for special needs. So you could have an application that spans both Azure and Azure Stack. So this is a development pattern that we have available. The second is cross-cloud scaling. So in cross-cloud scaling, when we first started and came out with Azure Stack, one of the things people asked for most is bursting and bursting capabilities. So Azure Stack does give you the capability, because we're using a consistent API and consistent control plane, to actually scale your applications. So you could use the compute in Azure Stack, and during periods of high volume or high traffic, you can scale your application to Azure. So this gives you flexibility and resiliency because of the Azure Stack consistency. So imagine if you're looking at a retail scenario and you've got peak workloads, you can actually scale to Azure if you needed to. Second, the third one is data sovereignty and gravity. And oftentimes we have customers who have data sovereignty requirements. They need to keep the data resident within their location, and that could be a city, a country. So the data needs to be resident, but you could have parts of your applications or services running in Azure. So the data remains resident, but you can create the application to span both Azure and Azure Stack, maintain your data sovereignty rules, but making use of the services in Azure. Next one is, I think, one that's very exciting and getting a lot of interest from our customers right now is they're starting to look at AI and machine learning. And one of the key things people are trying to do is get insights from their data, from all their data sources. So AI at the edge gives you the capability to create a pattern where we're training models in Azure. So you could have machine learning models in Azure that are trained, but then you can score on premises. So in an Azure Stack environment, you could do the real-time processing with machine learning. And you create this continuous feedback cycle where you train in Azure, score on premises, get learning from the machine learning models on Azure Stack, and then again, go back to Azure and retrain the models. There you can get inferencing done at the edge and get insights very quickly, but continue to modify your machine learning model. So this one, I think, is one that we're seeing more and more interest in as people are starting to get inputs from devices, sensors, but even from their data. They want to actually do more inferencing and machine learning at the edge. The next one is geo-distributed applications. And here we are looking at applications that can go across different boundaries. So we're using microservices and different applications to actually create applications that can be used globally. And then one of the last ones is tiered data analytics. So from a tiered data analytics perspective, you can get insights across your entire fleet of information. So you get overcome latency challenges. You have data analytics across all of your Azure Stack systems. So all of these patterns, is you'll see they will be, they're available today for you to really start looking at how you could use Azure Stack to start, and what are the things that you can do with Azure Stack. So with that, I'm going to kick off a video of one of our partners who's actually using Azure Stack as, and you can see as a service provider, the impact it's having on their customers. Maybe. Why is it not? It's not playing. There we go. So this is, as we fix the video. So the video is of a partner of ours, Rivera.
Rivera is a specialist cloud service provider. Our focus and commitment is how we deliver cloud services to our customers.
So one of the first customers that we onboarded to Azure Stack by Cloud Creator was iMoku, who are a digital health charity.
The key reason for choosing the Microsoft Azure Stack was around the accessibility of our iMoku app out to our community of users.
I've seen the problem of children with unmet health need. These children are coming from communities that are remote, rural, and marginalised. iMoku is a response to this problem. It is a cloud-based health system delivering health services to these children in seconds and in minutes.
And in this case, it's a 3-year-old, and this shows that he has a sore on the back of his left ankle and has quite nasty swelling on the inside of his ankle. Oh, I just clicked a button and said, go to hospital, and it was done. Because the work had already been done by the person in the kindergarten.
Since using the Azure Stack, we've had a significant improvement in the reliability and trustworthiness in the healthcare setting.
Azure Stack, as part of the Azure hybrid ecosystem, it's the only solution that we can deliver both from our own data centers fully consistently through to the Microsoft Azure environment.
You begin to solve issues such as data sovereignty concerns and latency considerations.
It's about placing health services within arm's reach of everyone who needs it, no matter where they are in New Zealand.
So that was an exciting application of Azure Stack. It really shows how our service providers, because we work a lot with our partners as well as enterprise customers directly, but you can see the power of Azure Stack and having it available to really have a full cloud available on premises and the impact it can have to some of the business. So with that, I'm going to just end our session with a couple of places where you can get more information on Azure Stack. So the first is I talked about some of those solutions. We've got the hybrid application solutions to get you started in looking at how you can use Azure Stack and the benefit of Azure Stack as an extension of Azure. This gives you the hybrid cloud solutions. We have the additional details available on Azure Stack in the overview. We're very excited about all of the additional innovation we continue to drive in Azure Stack. Thank you.